Okay, let's unpack this. Picture a courtroom, right? But this isn't your typical criminal case. It's uh, intensely personal.
Yeah.
It's about a relationship, a connection between two people that fractured, leading to a claim of, well, physical violation. We're talking about a civil lawsuit here, not the state pressing charges. It's one person saying another caused them harm, legally speaking.
And it's a really stark look at how the law gets involved in these, incredibly complex human interactions, especially when there's an alleged non-consensual act involved.
What makes it even more layered is the history these two individuals had. They weren't strangers. They were colleagues, former partners, navigating the same social scene.
Exactly. So the court wasn't just looking at one night in isolation. It had to consider their whole backstory, the dynamics, the messy reality of their relationship.
And that messy, complicated space is exactly where we're diving in today. We're looking at a civil suit for battery. That's the legal term for harmful or offensive touching without consent. The specific case is District Court originating Claim No. 313 of 2022. The judgment just came out on May 23, 2025.
It involves a claimant, a woman, and a defendant, a man. They used to work together and were romantically involved for a time.
Our main source here is the court's own detailed judgment. It's written by District Judge Sia Ake Kaur, and it really lays out the entire story, the evidence presented, and the judge's thinking process.
Yeah, it's quite comprehensive. We're also looking at a news article that summarized the outcome, which gives us a bit of an outside perspective, too. These are the documents guiding our deep dive.
So what we want to do today is walk you through this case as the court saw. We'll look at the evidence from both the claimant and the defendant. We'll try to understand how the judge decided who to believe, especially when their stories clashed, which they did.
And explore what battery actually means in this kind of deeply personal situation. And maybe, just maybe, pull out some lessons, some takeaways about navigating relationships, consent, boundaries.
Especially, in today's world where things can sometimes move pretty fast, connections can happen quickly. What does this case teach us?
Okay, so to understand the incident, we really need to start with the relationship itself. How did these two even meet?
Right. The judgment says they first met sometime back in 2015. They were colleagues at the Defense Policy Office, DPO, under MINDEF. So same workplace from the get-go.
Professional and personal lives already intertwined.
Yeah. And according to the claimant's account, things turned romantic around June 2015. She mentioned they were sexually intimate between April and December of that year.
But there was a major point of disagreement early on, wasn't there? About how open the relationship should be.
Exactly. The claimant testified that the defendant wanted their relationship to be known, like public knowledge among colleagues and friends. But she strongly preferred to keep it secret.
And her reasons weren't trivial, according to the judgment. She was worried about, how it would look at work, the office atmosphere.
And crucially, what would happen with their mutual friends if they broke up? The judgment actually calls this difference a constant source of tension between them.
That sounds like a difficult dynamic to sustain.
Apparently so. The claimant stated this tension was a factor in her deciding to end the romantic part of the relationship in December 2015. But, importantly, it wasn't a clean cut. They agreed to try and remain friends.
And the judgment notes they still had feelings for each other. That's a really significant detail.
It is. Because they still worked in the same office, shared the same group of friends, it meant they kept interacting, chatting, hanging out, meals, fitness classes together. It wasn't like they became strangers.
So it shifted to a different kind of relationship, but still very much connected.
Now, the defendant had his own perspective on their history, especially before the incident. He recalled specific times they were consensually intimate.
Yeah, he mentioned early morning, October 14th, 2015, and then again late January 30th into the 31st, 2016.
He described their relationship overall as complicated, sort of on again, off again, and he claimed he was the one who lost romantic interest around October 2016.
And his perception was that she only sought him out when she was bored. That's quite a different framing.
It is. It suggests he saw their post-breakup interactions differently than she might have. Maybe less about mutual feelings and more through his own lens of her behavior.
So you have this backdrop. Shared workplace, past intimacy, ongoing tension about openness, lingering feelings, different perspectives on the post-breakup phase. It's all crucial context for what happened next.
Absolutely. It sets the stage for the incident at the heart of this case the night of July 9th, leading into July 10th, 2016. Let's walk through the claimant's account of that night.
Okay, according to her, it started with a group dinner drinks on July 9th. Colleagues were there, including the defendant.
After dinner, a smaller group, including the claimant, went to the Bang Bang nightclub around midnight. The defendant didn't join them initially.
But later, around 2 a.m., the claimant actually invited him to come join them at the club.
He did. He showed up. They had some drinks together there.
Then around 3 a.m., the group decided to leave. The claimant and defendant realized they were heading in the same general direction.
So they decided to share a taxi home. Practical decision at that point.
But during that taxi ride, things shifted. The judgment says they started making out in the cab.
And at some point during that ride, the claimant invited the defendant back to her place. Her intention at that specific moment, she said, was to have sex.
Okay, so they get to her apartment. What happened then, according to her?
She said they continued making out in her living room for a bit.
But then came what seems like the critical turning point in her narrative. She went to her bedroom, specifically the en-suite bathroom, to take a shower.
Right, and she testified that during the shower, she started to sober up.
And reflect. That's what she said. She thought about their history, the tensions, the on-off dynamic.
And she realized she just didn't want to go back there. She didn't want to revisit the past romance, didn't want to give him, false hope that they might get back together.
The judgment uses her words. She felt overwhelmed with regret for inviting him over and suggesting sex earlier. A complete change of heart.
So what does she do? She said immediately after getting out of the bathroom, she told him, clearly, "You should go home. This isn't happening." Asked him to leave right then.
How did he react to that, according to her?
She said he was taken aback, surprised. But he didn't leave. Instead, he got emotional, started pleading with her to reconsider, to get back together romantically.
So it turned into an argument.
Yeah, she described it as a heated conversation that went on for about 10 minutes. Him questioning her, was she seeing someone else? Disagreeing when she said they weren't compatible? Just pushing back.
That sounds intense. How did she handle it?
Eventually, she felt it was pointless. She stopped engaging in the argument. She just told him firmly she was going to bed and he needed to see himself out. Basically, leave.
Okay, so she disengaged and went towards her bed.
Right. She got into her bed. The lights were still on in the bedroom. She lay down on her right side, deliberately facing away from him, with her back to him. She said this was meant as a clear, nonverbal signal. "I'm done talking. You need to leave now."
But he didn't leave.
According to her account, no. He kept pleading for another moment. And then, she said, in a matter of seconds, he took off his shirt and pants and got into the bed with her.
After she had told him to leave and turned her back.
Yes. And before she could really react to him being in the bed, she alleged he forcefully wrapped his arms around her from behind and restrained her physically. She tried to push his arms away, but couldn't.
And this is where the core allegation of battery comes in.
Exactly. She testified that while he was holding her like that, he used his left hand, reached into her pajama shorts, and inserted one finger into her vagina without her consent.
Wow. Okay. Her reaction.
She described feeling immense shock and outrage. She managed to free her left hand somehow, pushed his hand away, shoved him off her, sat bolt upright in the bed, and then shouted at him, demanding he leave immediately. Just get out.
And did he leave then?
Her account says he didn't say anything initially. He just scoffed, got dressed angrily, walked out, and slammed the front door hard behind him.
A very abrupt and angry exit, it sounds like.
But wait, there's a bit more to that sequence. She said moments after he slammed the door, he came back, knocking or ringing the doorbell.
Seriously, why?
She opened the door just a crack, tentatively. She said he then barged past her, grabbed some belongings he'd left behind in the living room, and then stormed out again.
So a really volatile ending to the night. From initial intimacy to a clear withdrawal of consent, an argument, the alleged restraint and penetration, and then this angry departure and return.
It's a very detailed and, frankly, disturbing sequence of events she presented to the court.
And the court didn't just have her word. There were those text messages exchanged shortly after, which became pretty significant evidence.
Right, which brings us neatly into Section 3, the immediate aftermath, as seen through those texts. Let's look at what was said.
Okay, so the defendant sent the first messages quite early in the morning between 4 to 4 a.m. and 4:32 a.m. on July 10th, not long after he left.
Some key ones the judgment highlights.
Yeah.
Stop stringing me along if this is going nowhere. Then, very quickly after, I apologize that I got out of control again.
That, again, seems pretty loaded.
It does. Then he texted, but let's avoid putting ourselves in those situations again.
Yeah.
And finally, just thanks.
The claimant didn't reply right away, did she?
No, her first response was much later that day, around 12 into 7 p.m. Just one word. Sorry.
sorry. What came after that?
Then she sent a few messages that seem a bit mundane on the surface, but she later explained them. Things like, "Yep, you too, no one allowed on my bed unless clean," and your hair was dirty hump because you were at the club, and have to change pillowcase.
Okay, so practical stuff, but maybe with an undertone, given what she alleged happened in the bed.
Possibly. The defendant replied to her, "Sorry," saying something like, "Ambium, I'm sorry too for being childish and throwing a hissy fit. Should have left the moment you told me to." He also apologized about the bed cleanliness thing.
So he acknowledged he should have left when asked. That seems important.
It does. The conversation continued. She texted, "I think we could have enjoyed each other last night and had fun, and I wanted to, but not for the wrong reasons."
He seemed confused by that, right? He replied, I don't understand. What do you mean not for the wrong reasons?
She tried to explain. "Bad judgment. I'm not in the best place in my life to make decisions that affect people's emotions."
And then later clarified again after finding his phone.
Yeah. She mentioned sobering up in the shower and thinking about it, saying, "So I couldn't," meaning she couldn't go through with it.
He replied, yeah, I figured. And then later, I would have loved to do it last night, but not for the wrong reasons. It sounds like they were both circling around this idea of mixed feelings or bad timing.
His final message cited was, "I still stand by what I said, but whatever your emotional state is now, it's better for both of us if you just let me in." Her last text was more neutral, just, "That was really sweet and I really appreciate it. Enjoy the movie."
That initial sorry from her, though, the defense likely seized on that.
They did. But she explained it to the court. She said it was instinctive, a way to try and smooth things over, de-escalate because he was already angry. She felt shocked, confused, couldn't process or name what happened right away. It wasn't an apology for lying, but an apology perhaps for the situation turning sour, coming from a place of shock.
The court accepted that explanation.
Yes, the court found her explanation plausible, given the circumstances and her state of mind described.
These texts, sent so close to the event, offer a fascinating, if somewhat ambiguous, glimpse into their immediate reactions and the tension.
Absolutely. And this immediate aftermath, this confusion and attempt to normalize, really set the stage for the long journey the claimant went on afterwards, which eventually led her to court years later.
Let's get into that journey in Section 4. What happened in the days, months, years after July 10th, 2016?
Well, according to the claimant's testimony, she didn't immediately label what happened as sexual assault. She felt sort of responsible for upsetting him, even blamed herself. So instead of dealing with the negative feelings, she tried to push them down and just carry on with the platonic friendship.
That sounds incredibly difficult, especially working together and sharing friends.
Yeah. And incredibly, she even testified that around late 2016, early 2017, she considered getting back together romantically with him.
Really? Why?
She described it as a warped belief. Like maybe if they were officially a couple, the incident wouldn't seem so bad or wouldn't matter as much. It really speaks to the level of confusion and denial she was experiencing.
So when did her understanding shift?
The turning point, she said, was mid-2017. She started reading more about the Me Too movement, hearing other people's stories, and through that, she had this sudden realization, as the judgment puts it, that what happened to her was sexual assault.
That must have been incredibly jarring, to reframe an experience with someone she knew and had trusted.
Exactly, she really struggled with it. But the Me Too stories helped her understand that her prior relationship, or even past consensual sex, didn't equal consent for what happened that night, especially after she clearly said no. She still battled feelings of shame, guilt, wondering if she somehow caused it.
When did she start telling people?
The first disclosures were in January 2018, about a year and a half later. She told some university friends and a colleague, Jeremy. She noted her friends were pretty quiet, which made her feel she had to seem strong. Jeremy, according to a footnote, recalled her saying the defendant forced himself on her, grabbed her from behind, and digitally penetrated her.
So she was starting to articulate it, but it took time.
A lot of time. It wasn't until November 2020, over 4 years after the incident, that she wrote it all down in detail. She wrote letters to two other friends, Rachel and Eugene, describing the assault and also expressing hurt about how they'd reacted initially. These letters were the first written accounts.
4 years is a long time. What prompted the move towards official action?
That came in March 2021. She sent an email to senior management at MindF. She mentioned experiencing 3 unpleasant encounters, one of which was a sexual assault by a civilian officer.
Okay.
She didn't name him at first in that email.
So bringing it up within the organization, how did MindF respond?
They strongly encouraged her to make an official report to the SAF military police. But because the defendant was a civilian, the MP command advised her the proper channel was the Singapore Police Force, the SBF. So she went to the police.
Yes, she filed a police report on March 26, 2021, and right around that same time, end of March 2021, she left her job at MindDef.
The police investigated.
They did. But in February 2022, almost a year later, the SBF decided not to take further action against the defendant. No criminal charges were filed.
Okay, so the criminal route closed.
Right. And having left MindDef, and with the police decision, she testified that she then sought legal advice about a civil claim. She felt it was up to her now to seek some kind of recourse.
So she filed the civil suit, the one we're discussing, on July 7, 2022, just shy of 6 years after the incident itself.
It's a really long, complex path. Years of processing, delayed disclosure, finally leading to the civil courts. And that delay and her behavior after the incident became central to the defendant's case.
Absolutely. Let's move into Section 5, the defendant's defense and how the court tackled the crucial issue of credibility.
So, what was the defendant's main position about what happened on July 10th, 2016?
His primary stance was, I don't remember. He stated he couldn't recall the specific events at her apartment that night. Specifically, he denied remembering hugging her from behind or the alleged digital penetration.
So he didn't offer a different version of events, like we were just cuddling or anything like that?
No. The judgment is clear on this. Because he claimed a lack of recollection, he didn't put forward a competing narrative of what happened in the bedroom. His defense wasn't this happened instead, it was, I don't remember that happening.
Okay, so if he's not disputing the events with his own memory, what was his defense based on?
It heavily relied on attacking the claimant's credibility, primarily through her actions after that night. His argument was essentially, look at how she acted afterwards. She kept interacting with me, she was friendly, sometimes initiated contact, even slept over platonically sometimes, considered getting back together.
The argument being that this behavior is totally inconsistent with someone who's just been sexually assaulted by that person.
Exactly. He argued, her post-incident conduct showed that whatever happened must have been consensual, or at least not the assault she described. It was nothing out of the ordinary for their complex friendship, he suggested.
So this put the judge in a position where the core task was evaluating the claimant's account. Was it believable on the balance of probabilities, the civil standard?
Precisely. The court had to scrutinize her evidence for consistency, internal consistency, did her story stay coherent over time, and external consistency. Did it match other known facts like the texts? The judge noted that because the allegation was serious, even in civil court, she needed cogent evidence, clear, convincing proof.
And the defendant pointed out specific things he claimed were inconsistencies in her story.
Oh yes, a whole list. Things like slight variations in the exact time she said it happened, the precise words she used when telling him to leave, which side of the bed she lay on.
Seemingly minor details.
Some were. Others were potentially more significant, like alleged differences between what she told friends initially versus later, whether she mentioned warning him about dirty clothes on the bed in her formal statement, claimed inconsistencies about a different alleged incident of groping, friends not remembering specific times they helped her avoid him, and even exactly when she first told anyone.
How did the judge approach these alleged inconsistencies?
Very methodically. The judgment goes through them almost point by point, and the conclusion. Most were found to be more apparent than real, or just minor variations due to human fallibility. The court didn't expect perfect robotic recall.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The exact words used to tell him to leave? She might have phrased it slightly differently in different accounts, but the judge found the core message was always consistent. Go home, sex isn't happening. The meaning was clear. Which side of the bed? Deemed insignificant. Chronological errors in a letter written years later, attributed to the effects of distress on memory, not fabrication.
What about the potentially more serious ones, like what she told friends initially?
The court acknowledged it's incredibly hard for victims to give graphic details the first time they disclose. The friend, Jeremy, even testified he might not have remembered everything perfectly or might have misunderstood. But the judge found the gist of what she told the beds. Jeremy forced himself, grabbed from behind. Digital penetration was consistent with her later, more detailed accounts.
And the dirty clothes warning about the bed. The defense used that to suggest she expected him to get in.
Right, but the judge flipped that. Given the context she'd already told him to leave, warning him the bed wasn't clean was interpreted as reinforcing he shouldn't get in, not inviting him. It actually seemed inconsistent with the defendant's claim the penetration didn't happen at all. Why warn him if nothing happened there?
Interesting interpretation. What about the other alleged incident, the second one?
There seemed to be a discrepancy between her account and a friend's recollection of what she'd told them about a separate groping incident. The judge thought it likely the friend misunderstood or misremembered, but also noted that the very fact there was a discrepancy could suggest independent recall, not a rehearsed story.
And the friends not remembering helping her avoid him.
The judge said, essentially, just because the friends don't recall specific instances doesn't mean it didn't happen or she wasn't feeling uncomfortable. Her letter suggested she had shared her discomfort, and avoiding him in their shared social circle would have been difficult and awkward regardless.
Okay, so the court systematically addressed these points.
Yes, and concluded there was neither incoherence nor material inconsistency in her overall account. Her testimony was deemed both cogent and compelling.
Did the defense raise other issues about her reliability, like intoxication?
They did. They questioned if her memory was reliable given she'd been drinking. But the judge rejected that, pointing to her testimony about sobering up in the shower, the fact they had a coherent, though heated, 10-minute argument, and crucially,
The text messages.
the defendant's own text messages sent right after. The judge found these texts strongly corroborated key parts of her story. That she invited him, changed her mind, told him to leave. They argued, he was on the bed, he left angry.
What about his explanation for that got out of control again text? He didn't say it referred to physical actions, right?
No, he tried to explain it away. Said it maybe referred to the argument getting heated or maybe being tempted by the relationship itself, which she knew she didn't want long term.
And the judge didn't buy that.
Not at all. The judge found it wasn't credible. He was the one who wanted the long-term relationship, according to the evidence. So why would he describe being tempted by that as something both of them do not want? Didn't make sense. The judge concluded it was far more likely referring to crossing physical boundaries, possibly linking to another incident mentioned elsewhere.
So the texts really backfired on his credibility.
It seems so. And this tied into the court's view of his overall claim of not remembering the incident. The judge found it more convenient than credible,
Why convenient?
because he could recall other earlier consensual encounters based on much vaguer text message cues. But for this night, which involved a dramatic sequence of events, invitation, rejection, heated argument, his own emotional text, he claimed total memory loss for the core part. The judge found that improbable.
So after weighing all that, the court found her account more believable.
Yes, on the balance of probabilities, the court accepted her version of events.
Now, a really significant part of the judgment deals with how victims react, doesn't it? Because the defense heavily relied on the claimant's post-incident behavior.
Absolutely. This is Section 6, and it's crucial. The defense argument was essentially, look how she acted afterwards, staying friends, being close, considering getting back together. That's not how a victim acts.
But the court pushed back hard against that stereotype.
Very hard. The judge cited legal precedent, other important cases, basically saying there is in no single way a victim of sexual assault behaves. To expect one is an unjustified and harmful stereotype.
Right. The court recognized that responses vary wildly. Shock, denial, dissociation, blaming yourself, feeling ashamed. These can all shape behavior in ways that don't fit a neat, predictable pattern.
Exactly. So the judge looked at the claimant's specific behaviors through that lens. Her opening the door when he came back, angry, accepted explanation. She feared a shouting match, wanted to de-escalate, not that she felt safe or wanted him back.
Her not immediately confronting him in texts or in person.
Understood as stemming from shock, confusion. Her initial sorry text. Seen as an instinctive attempt to placate him, given his anger, not an admission of fault on her part. The judge noted the contrast. She was shocked, he was angry and texting immediately.
And the really tricky part, her continuing the friendship, the closeness, even thinking about romance again later.
The court accepted her explanation that this came from a mix of confusion and denial. Trying to normalize things, maybe avoid blowing up their social circle, not fully grasping it as assault initially, blaming herself. It might seem counterintuitive, but the court saw it as a plausible, if complex, coping mechanism in her specific situation.
Did the defense try to argue her background should have made her react differently?
Yeah, they apparently suggested her education or prior sexual history meant she should have been more assertive or reacted in a certain way. The court flatly rejected that. Prior consensual history means nothing about consent on this specific occasion. Consent is moment to moment.
The court also found her timeline for processing made sense.
Yes, Evidence suggested she took time to process this 2016 incident, similar to how she processed the later, unrelated, difficult event. It supported her account of delayed realization, and by the time she was ready to clearly articulate the assault, they weren't in close contact anymore, lessening the perceived need or opportunity for direct confrontation.
So the judge's final take on her post-incident behavior.
That it was both plausibly and cogently explained within the context of their history, their social world, and her internal processing. It didn't undermine her credibility. Really important point about not judging victims based on stereotypes.
Okay, another major hurdle the defense raised was the delay. Nearly 5 years between the incident and the police report. That's a long time.
It is. And the court addressed this in Section 7. The starting point in law is clear. Delay itself doesn't automatically mean someone is lying. The critical thing is, why was there a delay? What were the explanations?
And the claimant provided explanation. Yes, several, which the judge found reasonable. Firstly, the sheer difficulty struggling with embarrassment, shame, finding it hard to even talk about initially.
That makes sense. What else?
Feeling like the muted reactions from some friends initially sort of confirmed her own self-blame, making it harder to speak up more widely.
The social dynamics, too.
Definitely. Feeling trapped by their shared friends and workplace. Fear of harming the defendant's reputation, causing a rift, or provoking a bad reaction from him.
And importantly, she didn't initially intend to go to the police, right?
Exactly. That only came about after her email to MindDef mentioning the incident leaked, ironically creating some of the social fallout she'd feared. MindDef then strongly encouraged the official report.
So the police report became a path to closure or justice after she'd already left MindDef and the situation had changed.
Right. The court considered all these factors and concluded her delayed disclosure did not undermine her credibility. The reasons made sense in her context.
What about the police deciding not to press charges? Did the defense use that?
They did raise it. But the judge in the civil case said, look, we weren't given any evidence of why the police or the attorney general decided not to proceed. Could be many reasons, including the higher burden of proof in criminal cases.
So the civil court couldn't just assume the police decision meant her claim was false. That would be speculation. This case had to be decided on its own evidence and the civil standard of proof.
Makes sense. Different systems, different standards. Did the defendant offer any motive for why she might fabricate this whole thing?
He suggested one. He speculated that maybe she couldn't cope with him losing interest in her after pursuing her, and this lawsuit was her way of not wanting to lose or getting back at him.
How did the court react to that theory?
The judgment says the court had considerable difficulty accepting it. The judge felt her actions, the very long delay, the indirect way she first raised it, General MindF email, not naming him initially, didn't really fit with a motive of immediate fabrication or trying to win in that particular way. It seemed inconsistent.
Okay, so the court assessed the core account, the inconsistencies, the post-incident behavior, the delay, the motive, and reached a conclusion on liability.
Yes. The judge summarized it clearly. The claimant provided a detailed and substantiated rendition of events. In contrast, the defendant's claim of simply not remembering was found lacking in credibility.
Co-weighing everything up.
After really detailed scrutiny, the judge found the claimant's memory of July 10, 2016 was cogent and convincing. The judge pointed specifically to the corroboration from the defendant's own texts and the overall consistency in her story across different tellings over the years.
And her later actions and the delay.
Were found to be adequately explained and did not detract from her credibility. The court accepted her narrative about confusion, denial, and the difficult social context.
Leading to the final ruling.
The judge found that the claimant has proven on a balance of probabilities that the tort of battery had occurred on 10 July 2016. Legally, the court was satisfied that his actions constituted an intentional, non-consensual, harmful touching.
Liability established. So the next step was damages. What compensation did the court award?
Right. Section 9 covers damages. The claimant asked for several types: compensation for pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, amenities, psychiatric harm, extra damages for hurt feelings, aggravated, damages to punish him, punitive, medical costs, and lost wages.
How much for general pain and suffering?
The court awarded $25,000 for that. This covers the emotional impact, the indignity, distress, humiliation, anger, which the law recognizes even if there wasn't lasting physical injury. The judge noted it was a single incident, not prolonged abuse, and her prognosis was seen as favorable, distinguishing it from more severe cases.
What about aggravated damages for extra hurt feelings due to how it happened?
Those were not awarded. The judge felt the $25,000 already covered her mental distress. And importantly, the court didn't find specific malice, spite, or contumelious conduct in the act itself, viewing it as an isolated, though wrongful act within their complicated relationship, rather than something done with particular cruelty or insult in that moment.
But punitive damages were awarded to punish and deter.
Yes, $20,000 in punitive damages. The judge felt the $25,000 compensation wasn't enough on its own to achieve the goal of punishment and disapproval in this case.
Why punitive here?
The court specifically called the digital penetration a profound breach of personal autonomy and a deep violation of bodily integrity, an act that warranted censure from the court and needed deterrence. The $20,000 signals that condemnation.
Okay, now what about the claims related to psychological harm, like the adjustment disorder diagnosis?
This was more complex for the court. The judge had difficulty fully accepting the diagnosis as being caused by the 2016 battery for the purpose of awarding specific damages linked to it.
Why the difficulty?
A few reasons. The diagnosis was made years later, retrospectively. The standard criteria for adjustment disorder usually needs symptoms to appear within months of the stressor, and the evidence wasn't clear enough about her specific symptoms in that time frame after the 2016 incident. There was also a lack of contemporaneous medical records from back then showing functional impairment linked to the incident.
So if the court couldn't definitively link the diagnosis back to the 2016 battery as the proven cause for damages purposes,
Then claims directly tied to that diagnosis, like future medical costs for therapy, were disallowed. Also, claims about impaired relationships or fear of certain clothing, while mentioned, weren't fully accepted as proven consequences of the battery for damage calculation, given her ability to confide in some men later.
but past medical expenses were awarded?
Yes, $8,697.39 for past therapy and counseling costs. Even though these were mostly incurred after a different incident in 2020, the court accepted unchallenged psychiatric evidence that the 2016 battery was the primary underlying factor, and the 2020 event just acted as a trigger, bringing the unresolved trauma from 2016 to the surface and prompting her to seek help then.
Okay, that makes sense. What about lost earnings? She claimed she couldn't work after resigning.
That claim was disallowed. She argued she couldn't work for about 10 months due to her emotional state from the battery. But the court found no contemporaneous medical proof from that time, linking her inability to work directly and solely to the battery. She resigned voluntarily, and her resignation reason cited seemed more related to workplace issues. While she spoke of emotional difficulties, the court needed stricter proof that the battery itself caused that specific financial loss, and found she didn't meet that burden.
So pulling it all together, the total damages awarded were
$25,000 general damages,
Yep.
plus $20,000 punitive damages, plus $8,697.39 for past medical costs. That adds up to $53,697.39 plus interest.
It's a complex outcome reflecting the specific harms the court felt were proven to the required standard.
Absolutely. And beyond the legal ruling and the specific dollar amounts, this case really offers some significant lessons, doesn't it?
Definitely. Let's get into those takeaways in our final section.
I think the most fundamental one, underscored by the entire case, is about consent. It has to be freely given, enthusiastically given, ideally. And crucially, it can be withdrawn at any point.
Yeah, even if things have started, even if you said yes initially, that moment the claimant said, you should go home, this isn't happening, that was a clear withdrawal. The court found it wasn't respected, and that's the essence of the battery here.
Another huge lesson is challenging those stereotypes about victim behavior. The court explicitly called them out as harmful.
Right. The claimant's journey, the confusion, the self-blame, the delayed realization, even maintaining contact, it shows there's no single right way to react. Her experience, shaped partly by the Me Too movement's influence on her understanding, highlights how personal processing timelines differ. Like theirs, with the secrecy versus openness tension, the unreciprocated desire for commitment. It created fertile ground for misunderstanding, perhaps. But misunderstanding doesn't excuse ignoring a direct withdrawal of consent.
No, it underscores how vital clear communication and, more importantly, respecting boundaries are, even when feelings are messy or history is involved. A change of mind has to be respected, full stop.
And legally, it shows how civil law offers another avenue for seeking accountability when the criminal justice system doesn't proceed. Different standards, different goals, but still a potential path for recourse.
The role of evidence was also key here, wasn't it? Especially those immediate texts.
Hugely important. Even though they weren't explicit confessions, they provided contemporaneous corroboration for key parts of the claimant's timeline and contradicted the defendant's claim of memory loss. It shows how digital footprints can become critical evidence.
Though it also showed the difficulty in proving some damages, like the psychological harm link and lost earnings, especially with the time lag. It highlights the practical challenges, even when the core incident is proven.
Yeah, the burden of proof for specific financial losses requires clear, often contemporaneous, evidence linking the loss directly to the wrongful act. That can be hard to establish years later.
So, thinking about this in today's world, maybe with faster connections, dating apps, hookup culture, do these lessons become even more critical?
I think absolutely. The ease of connection doesn't change the fundamentals. Clear communication, respecting boundaries, understanding that consent is ongoing and revocable. These are vital, regardless of whether you've known someone for years or hours.
Just because a connection might feel casual or fast doesn't reduce the need for explicit consent and mutual respect when it comes to anything physical. If anything, maybe it increases the need for clarity because you don't have that shared history to fall back on.
It's a strong reminder that everyone has the right to control their own body, and that right doesn't diminish based on their relationship status or history. A no, or a change from yes to no, has to be the end of the interaction.
This whole case involved the judge sifting through years of memories, tangled emotions, conflicting accounts. It's a stark look at how the law tries to grapple with these deeply human, often painful situations.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? In our own lives, our own interactions, how carefully do we listen? How much do we respect signals, especially when someone expresses discomfort or changes their mind? How do we ensure respect and clarity, especially when navigating the sometimes blurry lines of modern dating and relationships?
It's definitely something to ponder, the need for clarity, respect, and understanding that consent is not a one-time checkbox, it's an ongoing conversation.
Indeed, a complex case with lessons that resonate far beyond the courtroom.